Imagine waking up in a world where intelligence is both your greatest weapon and your most insidious curse. You've spent years sharpening your mind, devouring books, mastering complex theories, and solving problems that leave others baffled. And yet success feels perpetually out of reach, not because you lack ability, but because something deeper is at work. You hesitate when opportunity knocks. You overthink every decision until the moment has passed. You sabotage relationships just as they begin to flourish. You're not failing because you're incapable. You're failing because you're too capable, too aware, too analytical, too afraid of imperfection. This is the great paradox. Smart people often destroy their own success from within, not through ignorance or laziness, but through the very traits that should make them unstoppable. The same intellect that allows them to see every possible outcome also paralyzes them with indecision. Their self-awareness becomes self-destruction. Their ambition turns into obsession. Their brilliance becomes a prison. Why? Because intelligence alone does not guarantee wisdom. It does not grant emotional resilience. It does not protect against the deepest fears that lurk beneath logic and reason. Consider the student who spends months preparing for an exam only to collapse under pressure on test day. Or the visionary entrepreneur who walks away from a thriving business because they fear it will never be perfect enough. Think of the writer who crafts brilliant prose but refuses to publish, convinced that someone else will do it better. These are not failures of talent. They are failures of mindset, of internal conflict so profound that it overrides even the most formidable intellect. And what makes this tragedy even more unsettling is how invisible it is. Society celebrates intelligence, assumes it leads to success, equates high IQ with inevitable triumph. But reality tells a different story. Some of the brightest minds remain trapped in cycles of self-doubt, procrastination, and self-sabotage. They are haunted by an unrelenting inner critic, a voice that whispers, "You're not ready, you're not good enough. If you fail, everyone will know the truth." That voice is not stupidity. It is hyper-intelligence turned inward, feeding on itself like a snake consuming its own tail. So here lies the question that cuts to the core of human potential. Why do the smartest among us so often become their own worst enemies? What unseen force drives them to undermine their own progress? Is it fear? Pride? A need for control? A refusal to accept imperfection? Or is there something far deeper, an existential dilemma woven into the fabric of consciousness itself? We tend to believe that knowledge is power, but what if knowledge can also be a burden? What if understanding too much, seeing too clearly, actually hinders action? Imagine standing at the edge of a vast abyss, knowing all the ways you could fall, calculating every risk, weighing every possibility, and doing nothing. That is the trap of the intelligent mind. It sees every path, every danger, every flaw, and in doing so, loses the courage to move forward. And yet, the answer is not to abandon intelligence. That would be foolish. No, the answer lies somewhere deeper. In the psychology of self-perception, in the philosophy of identity, in the hidden mechanisms of the human psyche that govern our choices far more than we dare admit. This is not just about success. It is about the struggle between thought and action, between perfectionism and progress, between fear and freedom. So ask yourself, are you truly free? Or are you held captive by your own mind? Are you using your intelligence as a tool? Or has it become a cage? And if you have been sabotaging your own success without realizing it, what would it take to break free? But why does this happen? Why does the mind, the very thing that should propel us forward, so often hold us back? To understand this, we must look beyond surface-level explanations and dive into the tangled roots of human psychology, philosophy, and the silent forces shaping our decisions. Intelligence is not merely a cognitive function. It is deeply entwined with identity, perception, and the way we relate to ourselves and the world. And therein lies the problem. The philosopher Søren Kierkegaard once wrote, "Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards." This paradox captures the essence of the intelligent mind's dilemma. It constantly analyzes, deconstructs, and questions, searching for meaning and certainty before taking action. Yet life demands movement, progression, and sometimes blind faith. The smarter you are, the more you see the flaws, inconsistencies, and risks in every choice. You weigh possibilities endlessly, seeking the perfect path, but in doing so, you may never choose at all. Psychologically, this phenomenon manifests in several ways. One of the most powerful is the imposter syndrome, a condition where individuals doubt their accomplishments and live in fear of being exposed as frauds. It is especially prevalent among high achievers, precisely because they are capable of recognizing the gaps in their knowledge and experience. Unlike those who embrace confidence without scrutiny, the intelligent mind dissects its own worth relentlessly. The result? A cycle of self-doubt that undermines even the most promising opportunities. Then there is the concept of analysis paralysis, a term coined by psychologists to describe the state in which excessive thinking prevents decisive action. When faced with a decision, the intelligent mind considers every variable, every consequence, every alternative. While this might seem advantageous, it often leads to inaction. Instead of making a choice and adapting as needed, the mind becomes trapped in a loop of hypothetical scenarios, each one more terrifying than the last. Fear of failure, fear of regret, fear of imperfection. All these emotions feed into the paralysis, reinforcing the belief that doing nothing is safer than risking a mistake. Philosophically, this struggle echoes the ancient debate between rationality and emotion. Plato envisioned the human soul as a chariot pulled by two horses, one representing reason, the other desire, with the driver struggling to maintain control. In modern terms, this translates to the battle between the analytical mind and the instinctive self. The rational brain seeks control, order, and logic, while the emotional brain craves spontaneity, connection, and immediacy. For the highly intelligent, the rational side dominates, leading to a disconnect from the intuitive aspects of the self. Decisions become calculations rather than experiences, strategies rather than impulses. And in that shift, something essential is lost: the raw, unfiltered drive that propels action. Society further reinforces this dynamic. We live in a culture obsessed with optimization, productivity, and efficiency. Every decision must be justified, every action measured, every goal meticulously planned. While this mindset appears disciplined, it often breeds rigidity. The intelligent person, trained to seek patterns and predict outcomes, becomes increasingly resistant to uncertainty. They build elaborate mental models of success, convinced that deviation from the plan will lead to disaster. But life does not conform to models. It is chaotic, unpredictable, and filled with moments that defy logic. Those who cling too tightly to structure often find themselves unable to adapt when circumstances change. Worse still, the pursuit of perfection becomes a form of self-punishment. The intelligent mind sets impossibly high standards, believing that anything less than excellence is failure. This mindset creates a paradox. The higher the expectations, the greater the likelihood of disappointment. Mistakes are not seen as learning opportunities, but as proof of inadequacy. Effort becomes tainted by self-criticism, and progress is measured not by growth, but by the absence of error. Eventually, the weight of these expectations crushes motivation altogether. Perhaps the most insidious aspect of this pattern is its invisibility. Unlike external obstacles, lack of resources, societal barriers, or bad luck, this self-imposed limitation operates in silence. It is not a tangible enemy, but a shadow that follows every thought, whispering doubts and distorting reality. It convinces the mind that hesitation is caution, that self-criticism is humility, that inaction is wisdom, and in doing so, it erodes the very foundation of success. So we arrive at a chilling realization. The greatest threat to the intelligent person as success is not ignorance, nor competition, nor circumstance. It is the mind itself. Now, let us peer deeper into the consequences, those quiet, creeping effects that shape lives without ever announcing themselves. Consider the artist who paints masterpieces in solitude, never daring to display them. The scientist who publishes groundbreaking research but remains anonymous, convinced their work will never be good enough. The leader who hesitates at critical moments, paralyzed by the fear of making the wrong decision. These are not isolated incidents. They are symptoms of a systemic flaw, one that warps perception, distorts reality, and ultimately determines the trajectory of entire lives. At the heart of this issue lies a fundamental neurological mechanism, the brain's aversion to uncertainty. Studies in cognitive science reveal that humans are wired to avoid ambiguity, preferring known dangers over unknown outcomes. This tendency is amplified in highly intelligent individuals, whose heightened awareness allows them to perceive threats and complications that others overlook. Neurologically, this manifests as increased activity in the anterior cingulate cortex, a region responsible for detecting errors and monitoring conflicts. In simpler terms, the smarter you are, the more acutely you feel the weight of potential mistakes. This hypervigilance serves a purpose in controlled environments, such as scientific research or strategic planning, where precision matters. But when applied to personal growth and decision-making, it becomes a liability. The mind begins to treat every possibility as a potential catastrophe, triggering a cascade of stress hormones that impair clear thinking. Cortisol floods the system, clouding judgment, narrowing focus, and reinforcing the belief that staying small is safer than reaching too high. Over time, this creates a feedback loop. The more you avoid risk, the more fragile your confidence becomes, and the more you retreat into the illusion of safety. Cultural conditioning plays a role as well. From an early age, society rewards intellectual achievement, reinforcing the idea that success is earned through discipline, logic, and relentless effort. Children praised for being smart internalize this label, often equating their value with performance. The result? A lifelong habit of measuring self-worth through external validation, grades, promotions, accolades. But when achievements become the sole metric of identity, any deviation from perfection feels like betrayal. Mistakes are no longer lessons, they are indictments. Effort is no longer fulfilling. It is a desperate attempt to prove worthiness. This mindset breeds chronic self-monitoring, a psychological state in which individuals constantly evaluate their thoughts, behaviors, and emotions against an internalized standard of correctness. Psychologists refer to this as self-focused attention, and it is a hallmark of anxiety, depression, and burnout. The intelligent mind, already predisposed to introspection, becomes trapped in an endless cycle of evaluation. Every interaction is scrutinized for signs of approval or rejection. Every project is dissected for flaws before completion. Even moments of joy are tainted by the lurking suspicion that happiness is temporary, that success is fragile, that everything could unravel at any moment. What makes this trap particularly insidious is its universality. It does not discriminate based on profession, background, or status. It affects CEOs and artists, scientists and writers, leaders and dreamers alike. It thrives in silence, convincing its victims that their struggles are unique, that no one else could possibly understand. And in that isolation, the mind grows heavier, burdened by the weight of its own expectations. Even more disturbing is how this pattern ripples outward, shaping not just individual destinies but entire cultures. Societies built on meritocracy celebrate intelligence as the ultimate virtue, assuming that brilliance guarantees prosperity. But when intelligence is coupled with fear, the results are paradoxical. Innovation stagnates because people are too afraid to take risks. Leadership falters because decision-makers are paralyzed by overthinking. Progress slows because perfectionism replaces momentum. The irony is that many of history's greatest breakthroughs were born from imperfection. Einstein failed his first university entrance exam. Edison made thousands of unsuccessful attempts before inventing the light bulb. Steve Jobs was fired from Apple before returning to lead its resurgence. These figures did not succeed because they avoided failure. They succeeded because they embraced it, learned from it, and refused to let setbacks define them. Yet today's culture conditions us to view failure as something to be avoided at all costs, reinforcing the very mindset that stifles creativity and growth. And so, the cycle continues. The mind that should be liberated by knowledge becomes enslaved by it. The intellect that could illuminate paths forward instead constructs elaborate labyrinths of doubt. The very qualities that distinguish the gifted individual, their insight, their depth, their capacity for reflection, become the chains that bind them. If you recognize yourself in this description, pause for a moment. Ask yourself, how much of your potential have you sacrificed in the name of certainty? How many opportunities have you let slip away because you were waiting for the perfect moment? How many dreams have you buried beneath layers of self-doubt? The cost of this pattern is not just missed success. It is a life unlived, a version of yourself that never had the chance to emerge. And yet, there is hope. Understanding the mechanics of this trap is the first step toward breaking free. Awareness alone does not dismantle the pattern, but it illuminates the path ahead. The next stage requires rebellion, not against the world, but against the internal forces that have kept you shackled for too long. Rebellion begins not with grand gestures, but with a single shift in perspective, a radical redefinition of what it means to be successful, to be intelligent, to be human. The conventional narrative insists that success is the result of meticulous planning, flawless execution, and unwavering discipline. But this belief is a myth, carefully constructed by a culture obsessed with control. True success does not come from eliminating uncertainty. It comes from embracing it. It does not stem from avoiding failure. It arises from refusing to let failure dictate your worth. To break free, you must abandon the illusion that perfection is attainable. History's greatest innovators did not wait for the perfect moment. They acted despite the chaos, despite the doubts, despite the risks. Leonardo da Vinci left paintings unfinished. Beethoven composed symphonies while deaf. Marie Curie pursued radioactive research without knowing the full consequences. None of them achieved perfection. What they achieved was impact. This is the first rebellion, rejecting the tyranny of perfectionism. Perfection is not a standard. It is an excuse to delay action, an excuse to hide behind preparation, an excuse to never begin. The intelligent mind clings to this illusion because it believes that only flawless execution is worthy of recognition. But the truth is far more liberating. Done is better than perfect. Movement is better than stagnation. A flawed attempt is better than none at all. Let this sink in. You do not need permission to begin. You do not need to be fully prepared. You do not need to eliminate all risks. You simply need to take the first step, then the next, then the next. Action dismantles inertia. Momentum builds clarity. Waiting for certainty ensures paralysis. The second rebellion is even more subversive, reclaiming failure as a teacher rather than a judge. Society teaches us that failure is a stain on our record, a mark of incompetence. But this is a lie designed to keep us small. Failure is not the opposite of success. It is part of it. Every setback contains information. Every mistake offers insight. Every rejection reveals a path forward. Think of Thomas Edison's infamous quote, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." He did not see failure as defeat. He saw it as data. He treated each experiment as a necessary step toward discovery. The same principle applies to life. Every time you stumble, you gather evidence about what does not work, refining your approach for the next attempt. The intelligent mind, so accustomed to fearing failure, must learn to see it as a gift. This requires a fundamental shift in identity. Stop defining yourself by your achievements and start defining yourself by your resilience. Your worth is not measured by how many times you succeed, but by how many times you rise after falling. Let go of the need to be right all the time. Embrace the discomfort of being wrong. Allow yourself to be a work in progress, always evolving, always learning. The third rebellion is perhaps the most dangerous, silencing the inner critic. That voice, the one that whispers, "You're not ready. Someone else will do it better. You don't deserve this," is not your ally. It is a remnant of outdated programming, shaped by childhood conditioning, societal expectations, and the false belief that self-criticism equals improvement. In reality, harsh self-judgment erodes confidence, stifles creativity, and fuels anxiety. Instead of engaging with this voice, observe it. Recognize it for what it is, a survival mechanism designed to protect you from perceived threats. But here's the truth. You are not in danger. The fear of failure, the fear of exposure, the fear of inadequacy are all illusions. They exist only because you give them power. Replace self-criticism with curiosity. When you make a mistake, ask, "What can I learn from this?" When you hesitate, ask, "What am I afraid of?" When you feel inadequate, ask, "Is this thought based on fact or assumption?" By shifting from judgment to inquiry, you transform self-doubt into self-awareness. Finally, the fourth rebellion. Choosing presence over prediction. The intelligent mind is addicted to forecasting, to mapping out every possible outcome before taking action. But this habit robs you of the present moment. It keeps you trapped in hypothetical futures, disconnected from the reality unfolding around you. Presence is the antidote. It is the act of grounding yourself in the now, of accepting that you cannot control everything, and that is okay. Presence allows you to engage fully with life, to respond rather than react, to trust your instincts rather than overthink every decision. Meditation, mindfulness, breathwork. These practices are not mystical distractions. They are tools for reclaiming your mind from the grip of obsessive thinking. They teach you to observe your thoughts without becoming consumed by them. They remind you that you are not your mind. You are the consciousness observing it. By embracing these rebellions, rejecting perfectionism, redefining failure, silencing the inner critic, and choosing presence, you dismantle the internal structures that have held you back. You stop waiting for the perfect moment and start creating momentum. You stop fearing imperfection and start valuing progress. You stop measuring yourself against impossible standards and start appreciating your humanity. This is not about becoming fearless. It is about moving forward despite fear. It is about choosing action over analysis, courage over comfort, and growth over stagnation. And in doing so, you reclaim your power. Now, at the precipice of transformation comes the final revelation, the truth that shatters illusion and exposes the core of human struggle. Success is not a destination. It is not a trophy to be claimed, a checklist to be completed, or a position to be attained. Success is not the absence of failure, nor the accumulation of accolades, nor the conquest of challenges. Success is not even a thing at all. It is a verb, a process, a continuous unfolding of becoming. Here lies the ultimate paradox. The more you chase success, the further it eludes you. The more you seek certainty, the more trapped you become. The more you demand perfection, the more stagnant your growth. The very mindset that promises mastery becomes the chain that binds you. This is the deception that has ensnared countless brilliant minds throughout history, that success is something to be captured, controlled, possessed. But true success is fluid, dynamic, and ever-changing. It is not the result of meticulous planning, but the byproduct of engagement, of immersion, of showing up again and again, even when the outcome is uncertain. It is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act in spite of it. It is not the elimination of doubt, but the acceptance that doubt will always be present. And so, the greatest act of rebellion is not in defying the world, but in defying the illusion of control. It is in surrendering to the unknown, in trusting the process, in allowing yourself to be imperfect, to be vulnerable, to be human. Because here is the truth. You were never meant to have all the answers. You were never meant to predict every outcome. You were never meant to be immune to failure. You were meant to explore, to create, to stumble, to rise, to evolve. The moment you stop trying to engineer perfection and start embracing the messiness of growth, something shifts. The weight lifts, the paralysis dissolves, the path clears. History remembers not those who played it safe, who waited for certainty, who sought validation before acting. It remembers those who dared, who questioned, who broke rules, who forged new ways of thinking, the ones who trusted their instincts, who moved forward even when the future was unclear, who believed in something greater than their own limitations. And so, the final realization is this: your intelligence is not the obstacle. It is the tool. The difference lies in how you wield it. Will you use it to construct elaborate defenses, to justify inaction, to critique yourself into paralysis? Or will you use it to illuminate the path forward, to refine your approach, to learn from every misstep, to push beyond the boundaries of what you thought possible? Success is not the end goal. It is the residue of living fully, of embracing the journey, of committing to growth regardless of outcome. The intelligent mind sabotages its own success, not because it is flawed, but because it has mistaken motionlessness for wisdom, hesitation for strategy, self-doubt for depth. Break free, move, create, risk, fail, learn, repeat. For in the end, the measure of a life is not in the trophies collected, the titles earned, or the milestones reached. It is in the courage to begin, the resilience to continue, and the wisdom to understand that success is not something you achieve, it is something you embody. Now, the choice is yours.